You recognize these two? From Texas prospects to Super Bowl starters. We'll tell you the first-hand stories from the recruitments of Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hertz. And while the NFL is handing out its top prize this Sunday, we have some hardware to dish out as well. Steve Wiltfong joins the show to name his conference Recruiters of the Year. Plus, how Michigan is ramping up their recruiting efforts. All that and more as the college football recruiting show starts right now. Alongside Blair and Gulo, I'm Emily Proud. Please submit your questions in the chat. We'll answer them later in the show. Also, like the video. It helps spread the word and grow this fine program. So while you hit the like button, we're going to hit the headlines. The top dogs, well, they just love to be on top. Not only is Georgia #1 on the field, they're also number 1 when it comes to money spent for recruiting. A USA Today report says UGA spent $4.5 million on recruiting in 2022. That's over $1.5 million more than the next highest spenders, Texas A&M, and $2 million more than Alabama. Blair, I mean, it's working if it ain't broke, right?
Yeah, and the Bulldogs certainly aren't broke. These are certainly different layers to the recruiting process. You talk about effort, relationships, winning, NFL development, but having the biggest budget is nice too. And to catch up to Georgia on the field, it might be wise for other schools to bring that investment up in recruiting as well.
All right, the #1 player in the 2019 class has found a new home. Brian Doan reports that Antonio Alfano is now at Lackawanna College in Pennsylvania. He originally signed with Alabama back in 2019 and has stops at Colorado and another JUCO. Now, looking back to his early recruitment, Blair, what made him stand out as the nation's top player?
Yeah, a blast from the past. Alfano had a tremendous motor as a defensive end, the size and the tools that you look for in a prototypical pass rusher. And remember, the 2019 class had the likes of Trayvon Walker, Kayvon Thibodeau, Derek Stingley, Kyle Hamilton, just to name a few. So that speaks to the type of prospect Alfano was on the field.
All right, we have a top 4 for top 247 wide receiver Keelan Adams. It's Penn State, West Virginia, Va Tech, and Pitt. Now, this is per our Brian Doan. What kind of pass catcher does one of these schools get, Blair?
Yeah, an explosive pass catcher. He has elite vision in the open field. He flashes really, really good body control. And the winning school will get a productive player, too. Adams had 16 touchdowns and over 1,000 receiving yards as a junior last fall.
The #3 running back in 2024 told Steve Wiltfong that he plans to play both football and baseball in college. He visited Michigan and Texas back in January and most recently taking a trip to Duke. Blair, what kind of athlete is Taylor Tatum?
Certainly one of the best athletes the state of Texas has to offer in the 2024 recruiting cycle. Tatum averaged over 8 yards per carry as a junior, and our guy Gabe Brooks calls him an instinctive lane finder. So that's the perfect description for a really good running back that just seems to play the game at a different speed.
All right, let's welcome in our director of recruiting, Steve Wiltfong. Steve, we hit the dead period, so not a ton of intel, but you've been still busy handing out some awards. We're going to have more on that in just a bit. But first, what's the latest on 4-star interior offensive lineman Jordan Seton's visit to Georgia?
Well, it was an eye-opening visit for him to get down there and spend some time with the defending 2-time national champs. Ohio State was the program that I pegged as the one to beat in the fall for Jordan Seton, but he's obviously considering a lot of other programs, and I think the visit to Athens moved the needle for the Bulldogs as they have the #1 recruiting class in the country, and Jordan Seton is an offensive lineman that I could ultimately see in the fold for them down the road. Obviously, Ohio State's still well positioned. He said he's going to be planning some spring visits, so look for that schedule to be out there soon. But Georgia, definitely a major contender for Jordan Seton following his visit there at the end of January.
Steve, 4-star defensive lineman Nigel Smith is one of the most coveted players at his position with close to 40 scholarship offers. He recently cut his list down to 16, but there are more schools trying to get involved and get in the mix there with him. What's the latest in the recruitment of Nigel Smith?
Well, he has his first visit of the spring setup. Nigel's going to be at Texas Tech for what should be a big recruiting weekend for the Red Raiders, the first weekend of March. And Joey McGuire and Texas Tech, they have the nation's #7 recruiting class early in the cycle. Just finished with the #26 class, which is their highest recruiting ranking in 24/7 Sports history this past cycle. Had some big wins during the fall, including a victory over the Longhorns. Now they're looking for some big wins on the recruiting trail. They're going to bring Nigel Smith in the first weekend of March. Oklahoma is a program that's always been well positioned for him. He's been on a lot of college visits over the last year: Alabama, Penn State, Texas A&M, Ohio State, to name a few others. All the big hitters are in the mix in this one, but his relationship with Joey McGuire, Texas Tech, and that staff has him taking a hard look at the Red Raiders.
We are rocking and rolling here on the show, but if you're just joining us, please submit your questions. The only way you do that is if you are subscribed to the 24/7 Sports channel. All right, four-star running back James Peoples released a top 6 and has visits planned once the dead period officially ends. So, Steve, what are you hearing from his camp?
Yeah, this is one of the most sought-after running backs in the country. He's going to visit Ohio State at the end of March, has a great relationship with Tony Alford, building one with Brian Hartline and Ryan Day over there, loves Ohio State's player development at the position and offense. And that's a program that I think is very prominent in the top 6 that he released today, that also included Alabama, Oklahoma, Oregon, Texas, and TCU. He took visits to Texas and Oklahoma in January. Both were outstanding trips. He loves DeMarco Murray. He loves Tashard Choice. He's excited to get out to Alabama. He's excited to get out to Oregon. And TCU was one of the first schools to identify him and offer him. They had him in camp in the summer prior to junior year, extended him a scholarship, and he's been building his longest relationship with them. But Ohio State, they were in shortly after, and I think that they're well positioned with James Peoples as well.
All right, let's hand out some hardware. Conference Recruiters of the Year. We discussed Charles Kelly being named the National Recruiter of the Year. That was back on Tuesday's show. You can check that out. He was the top guy in the SEC. So let's take a look at the winner in the Big Ten. We got Penn State's Juwan Cedar. What makes him so great at bringing in top talent to Happy Valley?
Yeah, Coach Sider's had a reputation of being one of the nation's top recruiters for several years now, going back to his time at Florida. But he's a Sunshine State native that played quarterback at West Virginia. He understands it from all angles and has recruited so many regions over the course of his career, from the DMV to Florida, all over the nation. And it really paid off for Penn State this year. He was in the middle of a lot of their big recruitments. Penn State signed the best offensive line class in the Big Ten. He played a part in recruiting Alex Birchmeyer and Anthony Donka to Happy Valley. This was maybe the best linebacker haul in the Big Ten and one of the best linebacker hauls in the nation. Tony Rojas and Kavian Keys from Virginia. He was the lead recruiter on both of them. King Mack, a top 100 defensive back out of the Sunshine State, St. Thomas Aquinas, had all the big hitters after him. But you know Coach Sider's going to get a big win in the state of Florida as well. Brian Hartline from Ohio State, he was a National Recruiter of the Year for 24/7 Sports in the past. He finished in the top 5 of our overall standings, number 2 in the Big Ten. He's bringing in the best receiver class in the country. So Penn State and Ohio State adding key players on the trail this year. And Coach Sider, as Penn State tries to go from Rose Bowl to college football playoff, he's a big part of that talent pool they have there, including the best running back class, the 2 best running backs in the country going into next season. Best running back room,
12.
I should say.
Yeah.
In the Big 12, Steve, it's Oklahoma safeties coach Brandon Hall. The Sooners picked up the number 4 overall class in the 2023 recruiting cycle, and on defense, they added a lot of talent. How important were Hall's efforts in the cycle helping Brent Venables as they try to get that program back to what we saw what Venables was able to do at Clemson?
Well, they need all the difference makers they can get, Blair, after they had a substandard season there in Norman. Nothing that any of the natives are accustomed to, and certainly not what Brent Venables is accustomed to coming from Clemson. But Brandon Hall was very pivotal in them landing Peyton Bowen, outlasting Oregon, outlasting Notre Dame for one of the most wild recruitments in the 2023 class. Samuel Omoshigo is one of the most athletic linebackers in the country. They flipped Dave McCullough from Cincinnati. He also played a part in them securing cornerback Kendall Dolby and Eric McCarty. This was a defense that ranked 129th nationally last year in college football. These are guys that all, I think, can make some kind of impact in year one to help turn that ship around.
Hey, Steve, we have about 100 people watching and not even 20 likes. Do you think we can get to 30?
We need likes.
We need likes. All right, let's get there. You heard it from the man. Let's keep it rolling here in the ACC.
I'll join chat if we get that up to 30 likes.
You'll do what?
I'll join that chat afterwards.
You'll join the chat? Okay, people. Go ahead. Hit the like. Okay, we're going to make it 50, actually, and that way Steve Wiltfong will join the chat. So hit that like button if you want to get some intel from the man himself. We're going to continue to ask you questions here. Let's go to the ACC. Clemson defensive line coach Nick Eason is your pick there. He, of course, landed Vic Burley in the last cycle. certainly helping his case. What makes him such a dynamic recruiter?
Well, Clemson landed arguably the best defensive line class in the country this year, and they need it too, right, guys, with what they're losing up front from that defense. But Peter Woods, 24/7 Sports Composite, 5-star defensive line from the state of Alabama. They beat the Crimson Tide, among others, for Peter Woods. They go into the state of Georgia early in the cycle and beat the Bulldogs, among others, for Vic Burley, a 5-star with us. Tamarian T.J. Parker was a Penn State commit that ends up at Clemson over Tennessee and Florida, among others. And then Stephylan Green from Rome, Georgia, A.J. Hoffler from the Peach State. Those are also key pickups for Clemson, as Coach Eason finished as the nation's number 5 overall recruiter and really hit big at a pivotal position for Clemson this cycle, as they need to reload what's been such a very talented position room for several years.
Lastly, Sleeve, in the Pac-12, it was Demetrius Martin, the Oregon cornerbacks coach, pacing the Ducks. It was his first year in Eugene, but he really made a splash in recruiting. What stands out to you about what Demetrius Martin brings to the recruiting trail?
Well, Blair, you covering the West for so long for us, you've written his name a time or two in an article, as he's just been known as one of the best recruiters for quite a long time now. And it really showed up for Oregon in this class as the Ducks finished with the number 8 haul in the country. Roderick Pleasant was a recruitment that went down to the wire, top 2-for-7 cornerback from Gardena, California, who was looking at USC and Oregon, perhaps the fastest player in America from a football standpoint. He picks Oregon. Coach Martin was in the middle of that one. They also flipped Dalen Austin from LSU during the early signing period in December. And then he was also in his own son, Cole Martin, big pickup, right? I mean, Louisville and other schools were trying to flip him late. Cody DeCambra is a 4-star safety. Solomon Davis and Colin Gill. He had his hands on a lot of recruitments for Oregon this cycle. And when we added it all up, he was the Pac-12 Recruiter of the Year.
All right, Steve, we haven't quite hit 50. We are so close. So if you're watching this video, hit the like button. We're trying to get to 50, and then Steve will hop in the chat. So I'm going to say goodbye to you here, Steve, but we'll see. It's up to you whether or not you want to get in there. If you want to reward the people for getting there, you still have time to get to 50 likes. But thank you for answering all of our questions here. And be sure to check out new episodes of the Wiltfong Whip Around every Monday and Friday on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. All right, it's never too early to start looking at the 2024 recruiting rankings. Georgia already has 10 commits in this number 1 class. So here's our friends Andrew Ivins and Cooper Petagna on who needs a strong 2024.
So, Andrew, let's break down a couple of teams that need to bounce back with a strong 2024 cycle. And let's go to the ACC and Mac Brown, where the Tar Heels finished 2023 with the number 28 ranked recruiting class. Before that, number 11, and then back-to-back years where they were number 14. So a little bit of a dip outside of the top 25 this year. They're coming off their best year in the Mac Brown tenure, an appearance in the Holiday Bowl. They come up on the short side of it against Oregon. But with Drake May, they got a lot to work with on the field and a lot to sell as well. 2024 looks like it's going to be a big year for them on the trail.
I think it needs to be, right? You mentioned Drake May. They're going to have all eyes on them. You would anticipate them playing a lot of spotlight games, but North Carolina finishing number 4 in the ACC in that 2023 cycle. I mean, that's probably fine for 1 year, but ideally you're trying to stack back-to-back top 25 classes, top 15, top 10 if you can do it. Mac Brown, 71 years old. I still don't think he's ready to hang it up. So if North Carolina wants to break through and win an ACC title, I think it comes down to making a splash here in the 2024 cycle. There's some big names in state for the Tar Heels. Jadyn Davis, the quarterback that's in our top 32 right now. He's a guy that they got on campus during the January contact period. I'm interested to see what happens there. Obviously, Michigan has been linked to Jadyn Davis along with plenty of other programs. So to me, I think they need to rebound big here in 2024. It's still an exciting program. You mentioned it. They had a good season, but just with Drake May and that offense that's going to score points, you would think they could attract a little bit more talent to Chapel Hill.
You could also make the argument that the Tar Heels exceeded expectations in the 3 prior years. They've certainly done that. If you're knocking on the door of top 10 status, which they did in 2022, that's where you want to be. So I think we've kind of gotten a little bit used to the elevated air that the Tar Heels have been breathing in. Drew, another program that we're going to hit on here in the Big Ten. That's Michigan and Jim Harbaugh, and it's the second consecutive season that Jim Harbaugh has been linked to a job in the NFL circles. You wonder, is that starting to really kind of grab his attention and impact the Wolverines on the recruiting trail? It's also the second consecutive season that the Wolverines have made an appearance in the college football playoff. The last time they finished in the top 10 was in 2017, right? So it's been a while. You kind of wonder where the juice is on the recruiting trail for the Wolverines.
Right. It's a player development program. That's what Jim Harbaugh does. He turns those 3 stars and he makes them into NFL draft picks. And we look bad come late April, early May. But you're right, Cooper. I mean, back-to-back college football playoff appearances, and then you sign your worst-ranked recruiting class since 2018. It just doesn't really add up. Look at TCU. They break through, appear in the college football playoff, and they sign their best class ever. And they're just 2 spots behind Michigan in the rankings. So I think Jim Harbaugh, take advantage on the trail. And what I'll say right now, it's early in 2024, but they're sitting there number 5 in the rankings right now with 10 months to go. I brought up Jadyn Davis with North Carolina. He's, I think, a huge key piece for the Wolverines. What happens with him? This is a guy that they have had circled for a while, a regular in Ann Arbor. Well, man, if you've been to back-to-back, you've been to the dance, then get the job done. So that's what stands out with them. Justin Scott, Ryan Wingo, other prospects that they have been linked to throughout the recruiting process. So you just would hope for a little bit more. We know they want to develop players, but take advantage of being in the spotlight. Get that tier of recruit you normally wouldn't get. And I think Michigan, they've underperformed a little bit as of late.
One of the best developmental programs in the country. I think one of the best scouting programs in the country. They've certainly shown that the last 2 years, what they've been able to do, especially with their success in recent seasons against Ohio State. But when you're trying to go from good to great, that's really where it stands out. And it's kind of showed up the last 2 seasons, this past year against TCU and the year before as well. So what's next for Michigan? You wonder, do the NFL rumors with Jim Harbaugh, is that impacting them on the trail? You mentioned Jadyn Davis for North Carolina, Michigan in the mix of that one as well. So we'll see what happens there. Drew, another one that might take a couple people by surprise, but Florida, they finished inside the top 15, a little bit of an up and down season on the field and off the field as well for Billy Napier in his first year. The Gators go 6-7, and they had a really good year from top to bottom, but in terms of really kind of being in the news cycle, it kind of felt like they were in it for the wrong reasons on the recruiting trail. Jaden Rashada, one of them. I think we've detailed that and profiled that recruitment in depth. You could also look back to a couple other guys as well. Cormani McClain, the Gators were in it for the likes of Mark Fletcher, Francis Mauigoa, Samson Okunlolo, so on and so forth. A lot of high-profile recruitments, and the Gators did a really good job. But for Billy Napier and the Gators to take that next step, it kind of feels like they're going to have to win the majority of these instead of looking on the outside in.
Right. I think Billy Napier is in a position where he needs to keep selling the future. You mentioned 6-7 for the Gators. Well, that first month for them of the 2023 season, it's difficult, right? They travel to Utah, play Tennessee at home. They got to go to South Carolina, Kentucky. I mean, the losses could pile up early. And I think if Billy Napier wants to get year 3 and not be on a hot seat, remember in Gainesville, I mean, there was a ton of pressure there. They ran Jim McElwain out of town. He needs to sell a top recruiting class. He needs to sell, hey, I got my first foundational class and now I'm getting more of my guys and bringing them in and building out my 85-man roster. So that's what I think Florida's here. They also got to figure out the quarterback situation. We can talk about Jaden Rashada, Marcus Stokes. That's not really on Napier, but at the end of the day, they have to figure that position out. They must hold on to DJ Lagway, the top 50 quarterback they have committed out of Texas. So to me, this is more of kind of an optics thing, right? Billy Napier needs to signal, to the people in the stands in the swamp that, hey, give me some more time, right? I don't think anyone's anticipating Florida to contend for an SEC title here in 2023. But if he wants to get more time and build out his program, then he needs to stack another highly ranked recruiting class. And it's going to be difficult. Look, Florida State, they have all the momentum in state right there. FSU and UF go head to head all the time on the recruiting trail. Kirby Smart in Georgia, they continue to come down into the Sunshine State and get what they want. And then Mario Cristobal in Miami. I mean, we might even be able to put him on this list, but he won a number of big recruiting battles. So I think the pressure is on for Billy Napier. And one of the easiest indicators year round is, hey, look, we're doing it when it comes to talent acquisition.
Yeah, Billy Napier asked for championship investment. Now the Florida Gators are going to ask for championship returns. That's kind of how it goes right there. All right, Drew, let's go out west to the Pac-12, or should I say the Big Ten. UCLA in the Bruins and Chip Kelly. They're not known as a recruiting program, but does that maybe need to change? The Bruins, the 2023 cycle ranks number 37. And this is a team that this is familiar territory for them in terms of what they've done recruiting-wise at the high school level. A team that's very active in the transfer portal as well. They took 13 LOIs this year and then 13 transfers. So that's kind of their combination. But in order for them to build a sustainable product in the Big Ten, once they move to that conference, you got to figure, right? They got to step up their game at the high school level.
They haven't signed a top 25 ranked recruiting class since 2018 when DTR was coming out of high school. I mean, that's just kind of crazy. Normally they sit in that 30 to 40 range. And you talk about that 2023 group. Hey, if you remove Dante Moore, our number 2 player, I mean, they're going to slide in the rankings. Well, Dante Moore is headed to LA. He's going to team up with Chip Kelly. And I think for them, that should allow them to get some more juice on the recruiting trail. You mentioned what they want to do in the transfer portal. Chip Kelly, he has the pro background. He's always going to treat that like free agency. So I don't think that's going away. But as you transition into the Big Ten, right, you have a quarterback of the future, go and win some recruiting battles. I think life in the Big Ten is going to be a lot different for the Bruins than it was in the Pac-12. We keep talking about it, Cooper, all the time on any airway. It's a game one in the trenches. And sure, yes, you can get it done with some mercenaries, some 1-2 year rentals, but look what happened to Mel Tucker and Michigan State. You know, they ran into some problems by taking too many veterans and not developing in-house. So I think for UCLA, I would like to see them maybe expand a little bit more. You know, can they get a top 30 ranked recruiting class? Can they get into the top 25? Hey, well, you got Dante Moore there. You're in Los Angeles. We know this is the name, image, likeness era. There's a ton of money, ton of businesses, ton of cameras out there in LA. So get the job done.
A lot of potential out there in La La Land, like you said, for Chip Kelly, Dante Moore, who don't want to play with a 5-star quarterback. So we'll see what happens with UCLA and the rest of the bunch this upcoming cycle.
You can catch those two on the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. New episodes drop every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, wherever you get your podcasts. There's an episode today, actually, with special guest Bruce Feldman of The Athletic talking Jaden Rashada's recruitment. And we are 2 likes away from 50. So if you hear the sound of my voice, please hit that like button. And take a look at this next graphic. You're going to love it. Look at these two. We got baby Jalen and baby Patrick, the starting quarterbacks for this year's Super Bowl. Once, of course, had recruiting profiles, just like everybody else on the show. Hertz was actually the #1 dual threat quarterback, while Mahomes is a little bit more anonymous. Obviously, that has since changed, but it's always fun to reminisce on some of these players back when they were prospects. So here to help us out with that is recruiting analyst Gabe Brooks. Gabe, appreciate you joining the show. Let's start with Patrick Mahomes. You've seen him play dating back to when he was a multi-sport athlete in high school. He had just 3 offers at that time: Rice, Oklahoma, and then, of course, the one he chose, Texas Tech. Mahomes was, of course, considered a 3-star, but I got to call you out here. Your Twitter bio says, and I quote, 3 stars are really good players too. So what kind of player was Mahomes when you were scouting him?
He was pretty unbelievable, and you know, just for record keeping purposes, I'll have to point out that not to throw anybody else under the bus, but I was certainly that long ago not in charge of his individual grade, but I was at a point in my own career where I was covering the full spectrum of high school sports, and you know, that involved. That involved everything with baseball, basketball, football, and getting to see him be dominant in a multi-sport capacity.
Gabe, he obviously flashed a ton of his potential in high school and even in college. But did you think seeing him as a young prospect that he could reach the MVP level that he's at now and arguably as the top quarterback in the NFL?
Well, you know, it's hard to say that you ever think somebody could become that, but he did so much unbelievable stuff in high school that I never really doubted it, even though I had much less of a perspective on the process of becoming an elite athlete back then compared to how I do now. He did so many things that he made really hard stuff look hard to do, and he made it obvious he was the only one who could do it. And he's the king. He was the king of the scramble drill, just like he is now. He's the best improvisational quarterback I've ever seen, and that includes Kyler Murray, who was probably the best high school player I've ever covered for any extended period of time. But Patrick was his teammate's favorite player, his coach's favorite player, one of really just a regular guy, which I think you kind of see nowadays too. But you know, he dominated. He had a couple triple doubles in basketball. He took his team to the Final Four in state and baseball, and you know comes from a baseball family, so he was kind of one of a kind.
Okay, Gabe, it's just us talking. You can say you called it. We'll give you credit for that. You called it back then. Here he is on an international stage. How about the quarterback on the other side, though? Jalen Hertz, very different recruitment for him as he was named the top passer in Texas back in 2016. But there was actually a lot of debate in that class between him and Shane Bouchelle, who is also preparing for the Super Bowl as the Chiefs backup. What a small world. So what do you remember about that debate that ultimately had Hertz end up as the top guy?
I think it was consistent with what we lean on nowadays too, and that is physical upside. And I don't know if a lot of people realize, but Hertz was a pretty big high school quarterback. You know, depending on the event, on the small side of the measurements, he would be 6'1", 200, and the bigger side of the verified measurements, 6'2", 205, 210. And when you saw him in person at a camp, just in workout clothes, you could tell he was a big dude. And, the same went for Patrick. I mean, he was at the smallest 6'2" and 205, 210 pounds and wore it that way. And but Jalen, I saw him at a next level athlete regional camp in Houston. And, about 8 years ago this month or last month probably, and won the position MVP at that camp. And, I think he kind of unfairly had a reputation to being a runner. If you go back and look at just the production, how much better year over year from sophomore to junior to senior, his passing ability really shows in that production. And, not to say that he was the high school improvisational master Patrick was, but Jalen was a very good improvisational quarterback. And what these two have in common is that they are always looking downfield for receivers when they break the pocket, not necessarily just living to tuck and run.
Gabe, I think back in the day, there was a misconception about his skill set. I remember seeing him in videos working out, right? He was considered a weight room warrior. His squats were insane, and he was able to do so many different things, and he wasn't given credit for what he can do as a quarterback. Where have you seen him take the most strides in his development once he's reached the NFL?
I think the biggest thing is taking fewer chances, unnecessary chances. And I think that you could see that even in college, that he'd gamble a little too often. And I think early on, maybe with Philly, he did the same, but he takes care of the ball. He takes way fewer chances than he used to. That's something that Mahomes also was accused of in high school and at Texas Tech. And a lot of people were skeptical of both of these guys for, maybe betting on themselves too often in the middle of action. But I think they've both done a really good job in developing a, discernment as passers, as playmakers, to make sure that they're not, the cliche, the live to play another down, so to speak.
Love it. Thank you, Gabe. It's going to be a pretty fun Sunday for you, reminiscing and thinking back on the time that you watched these two back when they were just little high school pups. So appreciate you joining the show.
Thank y'all for having me.
All right. It has been a headline-filled offseason so far in Ann Arbor, but with an early top 5 ranking in the 2024 class, well, things are starting to look up for them. Also, the back-to-back Big Ten championships they can hang their hat on. Sam Webb of the Michigan Insider is here with us now. Sam, let's put you on the show. I want to see your face. Here you are. First, the big news out of Michigan here. Chris Partridge is back after a few years at Ole Miss. The all-star recruiter officially returning here. So how does he impact Michigan's efforts on the trail for 24 and beyond?
Yeah, he impacts them in a huge way. If you covered Chris Partridge back a few years ago, his first run at Michigan, his impact was immediate. First as the director of player personnel, then he comes in and his very first cycle as a recruiter, back-to-back Recruiters of the Year award. First with Scout.com, and then when Scout came over to 24/7, he was Recruiter of the Year that year. A lot of the perception of him as a recruiter was built on his connection in Jersey, right? He was recruiting his stomping grounds. You know, he was Jabril Peppers' coach, and then he was Rashawn Gary's coach. And of course, Rashawn Gary's going to follow him. He goes and gets Cesar Ruiz. But where he really kind of, I think, showed his recruiting prowess was when he went down to the state of Georgia and got 2 top 5 guys. And really, I want to say it was back-to-back cycles or close to it, getting a guy like Aubrey Solomon from South Georgia, beating Bama and all the other, Southern powers for him, going down to the Atlanta area and getting Christopher Hinton, another top 5 defensive lineman in the country, beating Bama for him. He was so good on the recruiting trail that Nick Saban tried to come up and hire him back in 2018, only to get turned down. That's what Michigan gets back at a crucial time, kind of in their recruiting cycle in the NIL era. They're coming off back-to-back playoff appearances. You're supposed to have juice on the recruiting trail. You mentioned it. They're off to a top 5 start. But are you going to be able to close on some of these top 50 level recruits? I think that's in part a question about Jim Harbaugh's tenure and longevity in it. I think he's kind of answered some questions, turning down the Denver Broncos twice. He can sell that to recruits. But the NIL piece, that's going to be a bridge that they have to figure out how to cross. And this will be an interesting test case to see if they can still recruit at an elite level without doing what some of the other schools are doing in the NIL era to get prospects.
Sam, before we discuss the big picture, let's take a look at a couple of big targets, and there's probably none bigger than Jadyn Davis, the number 2 quarterback in the 2024 class. All the crystal balls right now, Sam, favor the Wolverines for Jadyn Davis. What can you tell us about his recruitment and Michigan at the moment?
Yeah, I think Michigan is far and away Jadyn's leader. I think that they were on the verge of getting his pledge in, say, late in the year into December, but that's when you get all of the upheaval or the talk about upheaval. Got Jim Harbaugh being mentioned in NFL circles, and understandably so. He was kind of entertaining that a little bit. You also have the quarterback coach, and I may have talked about this here before, but Michigan's quarterback coach, Matt Weiss, who ironically had been told by Jadyn's dad that he was a terrible recruiter, that he didn't have, you got to learn how to recruit guys. He's a pro guy, so cut him some slack. He's a guy coming from the Ravens trying to recruit high school kids. And Jadyn's dad, Jeremiah, was telling him, hey, man, this is, you got to kind of connect with the kids on a different level. He took coaching and actually got really, really close. So in a weird sort of way, being a terrible recruiter kind of helped him build a relationship with Jadyn. But then he gets fired, right? So Harbaugh is in the mix for NFL jobs. The coach that you're closest to and Matt Weiss gets fired. You got to calm all that down. I think Jim Harbaugh did a good job of connecting with the family, letting them know he's going to be here for the duration, turn the Broncos down without having his extension done with Michigan. I think that sends a message. And then you hire a quarterback coach that I think is really, really popular both in coaching and player circles in the program, and Kirk Campbell. They're really, really tight with the McCarthy family. JJ's family has really vouched for Kirk Campbell a lot. I think that's helped kind of get that relationship off to a good start. Now you get to closing time, making him feel comfortable with what you're going to be offensively. Are you going to throw it a little more? I think that's a big deal. And then the other piece, I think it's going to be a factor, guys, with all these prospects. What does NIL look like? Not necessarily making promises. If you aren't going to make the promises that other schools make, you certainly got to be able to lay down some firm projections. I think JJ will help with that as well. I don't know how much longer it'll go, but I just don't think that this will be something that Jadyn and his family drag out, over a long time.
Man, this is already such an interesting recruitment. Interested to see what happens next. All right, another top target here. Aaron Childs, the 4-star linebacker, visited back in January, but where do things currently stand with the Wolverines?
Yeah, so this is a big one. This is a big one for Michigan. It's a big one for Chris Partridge. You got to know the dude to know how he gets down. He comes right in the door, and he hits the ground running, recruiting. So I'm already hearing like he's going after Sammy Brown, the #1 linebacker in the country. He's going after KJ Bolden, #1 safety prospect in the country, right? They may be getting some help on that. If they are able to get Mantrez Walker, the 25 linebacker, this weekend, maybe that helps with KJ Bolden, right? They're going hard after Florida commit Miles Graham, and another top 5 linebacker. But the guy that as him coming in the door, they're already in pretty good shape with, is Aaron Childs. Michigan got on Aaron Childs back last spring, just came back up, or he just came up for the first time for a junior day visit in January, and was blown away by the experience. Now, he got close to George Hilo, and, we'll see what happens with George. But the fortunate thing for Michigan is he already had a relationship with Aaron Childs going back to Ole Miss. So he was on the phone with Aaron Childs yesterday. Aaron Childs going to be coming up for another visit here real soon. And when you get those out-of-region guys on your campus twice, and in this case, twice in a very short span of time, that's momentum building. You got some advocates. Chris Jenkins is from the program, from Good Counsel. His track coach is one that Michigan has a great relationship with already. So they're off to a really, really good start with Aaron Childs. He's one of the guys that I think in this cycle, uncommitted guys anyway, that they're really trending up with.
Yeah, Aaron Childs, Jadyn Davis, certainly top of the board material for a program that's trying to parlay those 2 back-to-back college football playoff appearances with a strong 2024 cycle. And looking ahead, Sam, obviously linebacker, quarterback, 2 positions, premium need for the Wolverines. Where else do you see this staff prioritizing from a positional standpoint in this 2024 cycle?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, man. Quarterback for sure. They got to hit on quarterback in this class. Got to. No question about it. After you get in linebacker, you're going to be losing some guys to the pros. So you kind of got to look at it from that perspective. Anticipating losing maybe a Junior Colson. They're able to fortify the ranks a little bit, going to get Ernest Hausman to transfer from over in Nebraska. But I look at running back, because you're going to lose Blake Corum. You're going to lose, probably going to lose Donovan Edwards. And if you're Michigan, you have got to be in the 4- and 5-star. You got to be living that life as a running back school, right? You got to be getting 5 stars left and right, because those guys are going to be high usage, high volume guys, in this program. So Jordan Marshall out of Ohio is a guy that they've done a really, really good job with early here in the cycle. He's been up. I think Michigan is one of his top 4 or 5 schools at the moment. And then here recently, they just had Taylor Tatum up on campus as well out of Texas. So they're swinging for the fences in that regard. Another place that you really got to look, after running back, think about it, guys, receiver. I'm pointing to receiver because I heard that Amarion Walker, who's a freak of a talent for Michigan, right? I'm hearing he's going to play corner. And that's one of the guys that I was looking at to be one of the breakout stars for Michigan in the foreseeable future. So you're going to lose Cornelius Johnson after this year. You're going to lose Roman Wilson after this year. You do have some talent in the hopper, but you probably are going to take maybe the #1 talent at that position and slide him over to the defensive side of the ball. And he's a lot like you. You guys will appreciate this. My man that was drafted by the Seahawks, the rookie All-Pro out of UTSA. I'll remember his name anyway. He ran a 4.26 40 at the combine. He was a 5th round pick. Now he's a rookie All-Pro for the Seattle Seahawks. He was 6'4", doing that, a 7-1 3-cone drill. We just heard that at 6'4", about 180 pounds, Amarion Walker just did the same thing for Michigan. So you're taking that guy, moving him to corner. That creates a need at the receiver position. So I'm thinking receiver is going to be a heavy emphasis in this class, going to get some more playmakers at that spot.
All right, great intel there. Meanwhile, back in the 23 cycle, Michigan finished outside the top 15. Of course, missed out on Nicholas Harbor, but this is actually Harbaugh's worst recruiting ranking in the last 5 cycles. It doesn't seem to matter, though. They're getting it done on the field. But how important is it for the Wolverines to get back to that kind of top 10 status where they've been before?
It's Tariq Woolen is, by the way, the guy that I'm talking about, Tariq Woolen. So if you don't know Tariq Woolen, go watch some film. He lit up the combine last year. Amarion Walker is physically the spitting image of him at like 6'4", 180, really super fluid and athletic at that size. And you put that at corner, you can have a lights-out player like the Seahawks have right now. But it's an interesting question because, look, there have been cycles where Michigan finished outside the top 20. The year that they got Aiden Hutchinson, I believe that was 18. They were number 22 in the rankings. Now, you're going to have those small number classes where that kind of happens. I think that he was a little undervalued by the rankings guys. He went to the Army All-American game, had 2 sacks, kind of showed that Greg Madison was right when he said this was going to be a game changer. Aiden Hutchinson wound up being that. But in this cycle, you mentioned Nicholas Harbor. I could throw in Jason Moore. I could throw in Jeremiah Love. I could throw in Dante Moore, Nicholas Harbor, who you just mentioned. All of the top 50 guys that they were on, they missed on. Now, that's not to say that they didn't have a good class and high upside class. I think they really did. Some guys, for instance, I think Jair Hill is going to wind up being a guy who performs at that top 50 level. They did a great job in the portal. But I think you got to look at it and ask yourself, if you're them, attacking NIL the way that we attack it, can we get those top 10 classes consistently, or are we going to be more in the 11 to 25 range? So far, it's looking like they might be able to do it like they want to do it and still finish in the top 10. Still too early to say, but that's something that you really have to look at. If they finish another cycle outside the top 10, coming off another playoff appearance, then you would have to really start to question, hey, do we have to adjust our expectations recruiting-wise if we aren't going to get down NIL-wise like some of these other schools are getting down?
Yeah, especially when you see rivals like Ohio State and what Penn State's doing as well. You kind of look around and we'll see what happens there. Sam, we actually have...
helps with that.
What?
I said Chris Partridge will help. He's getting another ace recruiter.
He
will help with that, though, so we'll see.
He certainly will. We actually have been asking our viewers to send in some viewer questions, and I will remind you that the only way you can do that is if you are subscribed to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. And we have a question for you. We didn't tell them to send them for you, but Sam, are you cool with answering a question from a viewer?
Let's go. Let's do
it.
Get it.
All right. This one is from Brian Hall saying, what are Michigan's chances with the top edge prospect, Dylan Stewart from D.C.?
Michigan is very, very good in the DMV. I think that you're adding another guy with connections in the DMV and Chris Partridge. I guess I forgot to mention that when you talk about Aaron Childs, he's really, really good over at Good Counsel. Mm-hmm. So between the number of DMV talents that they brought in over the years and how entrenched they are, Blake Corum, Nakai Hill Green, you go down the line, all the guys that they've gone down to that area and gotten, they have really established themselves as a recruiting presence in that region. I'm going to say with every top guy that they're on, I've gotten to the point now where I question how big a factor is NIL going to be. A lot of guys say it's not, but it's not a factor until it is. It wasn't a factor for the entirety of Nicholas Harbor's recruitment. He gets a marketing team in December. They start looking at NIL deals in January. Suddenly, Oregon is a big time factor. I remember going to sit down with Nicholas Harbor, and during the interview, he was like, "Man, I there's no way I could ever go to Oregon." This was before Oregon was like prominent on the list. I said, "Well," he said, "what's in Oregon but nature?" I said, "Well, they have Nike." He said, "That's all they have. That's not even in Eugene." What changed about Oregon in the span of 6 months? Nike didn't move to Eugene all of a sudden, right? They still had the same track program. They still had the same football program. What changed? Big time NIL. So my point is, with every single guy, I'm going to wonder until it gets to be closing time, how big a factor is that going to be? And can Michigan's projections over promises approach, is that going to be enough to seal the deal with the top prospects? They can outside the top 100, sure. But inside the top 100, this is going to be a test case that we have to wait and see how their approach is really going to fare in this cycle. If they can buck last year's trend, then I'll start to believe that it's not as big a deal as it seemed to be last year.
Nature and Nike. That should be the new slogan for Oregon. I love it. Sam, you're the best. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks a lot.
All right, be sure to head to the Michigan Insider for all things Wolverines. Blair, we love our producer, Kenny. He's the best, but he's telling me that I need to ask for 100 likes. I think he's a little nuts here, but if you want to prove Kenny right, prove me wrong, go ahead. We're going to answer some of your viewer questions. You have plenty of time to smash that like button. If you get to 100, then pat on the back for Kenny here. But let's go ahead and answer some viewer questions. You ready?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. This first one is from Hannah G. Do you think prospects in the state of Utah in 2024 are anywhere close to as talented as the strong 23 class? It's a good one.
I think there's a lot of talent. There might not be as much quantity in the state of Utah, and that's been a battleground state for a lot of programs out west. And you see schools like Michigan go in and try to get players in previous cycles as well. So it's become a hotbed state. You look at Isaac Wilson, he's the brother of Zach Wilson. He leads the charge in the rankings for that 2024 class, a 4-star quarterback in the top 24/7. But you've also got the traditional positions that the state of Utah is known to produce. Isaiah Garcia is a top 24/7 offensive tackle, just picked up an offer from Oregon. He's past the dozen mark already. Cash Dillon is a big edge rusher, about 6'5", 220 pounds, who fits the bill and is on that 4-star watch as well. You look at Davis Andrews, who's a big-time safety, maybe the best safety out west that we've seen in the last few months. And then Roger Saliampanga, you have to make a case that he could be the best tight end out west. And you think about players like Deuce Robinson and Walker Lyons and all these names that we became familiar with down the stretch in the 2023 recruiting cycle. I think the state of Utah will continue to be one of those states that coaches and recruiters go after because there is a lot of really, really good talent.
I love it. Great question there, Hannah. Appreciate that. I'm sweating in my boots a little bit. As soon as I asked for the likes, we automatically got 15. So if we can get to 100, that would be very impressive. So once again, hit that like button. Next question here is from Tyler C. It is directed towards you. He says, Blair, is there anything to watch for in regards to Dylan Raiola flipping high schools? Will that impact his recruitment at all?
Well, he moves from Chandler, which was about 20 minutes away from the Phoenix International Airport, to Pinnacle High School, which is way up in North Phoenix. If you're not familiar with the greater Valley of the Sun, that's about a 35 to 40-minute drive. So I think the only thing it changes is whether or not there will be coaches that are truly committed to going out and seeing him, because it's a bit of a trek to get up there. But they were doing it this whole past cycle for Deuce Robinson. That's where Spencer Rattler also played. So this is a program that has become a mainstay in the Phoenix area for producing talent. And I think for Dylan Raiola, it's not going to really change things. You look at schools like Georgia and USC, which have been by the school a number of times to recruit Deuce Robinson. By the way, the Trojans and the Bulldogs are also in that high caliber list for Dylan Raiola, along with Nebraska, formerly committed to Ohio State. So this is going to be, I think, a recruitment that will be interesting because he wants to take some visits in the spring. Don't know if he will get to official visits before he commits, but I think the plan right now, at least as it's laid out heading into the spring, is to take official visits. So it's going to be, I think, really fascinating to see. I don't think the change in schools is going to affect anything, except maybe a little bit more mileage for these coaches that have to tack on, the rental car fee for their university.
It'd certainly help his new teammates, right? I mean, when these guys are going out to watch Dylan Raiola, they might spot some new talent when they go watch them. So
yeah, a little bit more exposure for the younger players that are in that program. They had a chance this last cycle with, like I mentioned, with Deuce Robinson having been at Pinnacle and getting a lot of eyes on those players, including Miles Libman. He's a receiver who signed late with Stanford last week. So, this is I think a school that is going to see itself elevate because Dylan Raiola is there not only to draw eyes, but he's going to be able to sling the rock a little bit and maybe boost up some stats for some of these guys. So it's going to be really fun to monitor. I'm excited to get back out there next month.
All right. Hear that, recruiters? You need to get some good podcasts. How about some of our podcasts here, the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast? You just, lock that in for your long drive to go see Dylan Raiola. And next question here from Damian Z. With the way the Gamecocks are recruiting for 2024, do you believe that they could become a top 10 recruiting class this year, Blair?
Yeah, they're pacing for it already, right? They're already in the top 10, I think number 6 overall. They've got 5 commitments. All of them are 4 stars already. And when you think about what they have returning, especially at quarterback with Spencer Rattler, who took a step forward in his development and looked like the 5-star quarterback that everyone evaluated out of high school and everyone thought would be Lincoln Riley's next Heisman winner at Oklahoma. He's the cornerstone now and the face of that program, and it's year 3 for Shane Beamer. So you would think that now he will have his players that he recruited himself be a part of that program, be a part of the rebuild, and they're getting older, they're getting more experience. He has, I think, the blueprint of the players that he wants to fill some of those roles, and this is the year for them to take a step forward, much like what we saw with Tennessee on the field. They can boost that over and carry that over to recruiting, and why not finish with a top 10 class? They're already pacing for it. It's going to be one of those fascinating storylines to monitor.
I mean, it's only been getting better each and every year, so top 10 is next. Apparently, our director of research, Ryan McGrady, who is so awesome and drops in great nuggets throughout the show in the chat, is now starting a campaign, 100 for Kenny. So that is in reference to the 100 likes that our producer Kenny has challenged us to get. We're about 30 likes away, so we'll see. Got a few more questions here. This next one comes from Mega Hamilton. Blair, who are the schools to watch with Elijah Rushing?
This is the number 1 edge rusher in the class for the 2024 cycle. He was a player that we saw a number of times in the offseason last year, and 6'5", 220, has all the makings of that elite playmaker on the edge that you like to see. Right now, you have to look at Notre Dame as a really strong contender for his services. He's really interested. He's already been to South Bend. He wants to get back there. He's beginning to sort out through official visits. He's got a dozen schools on his list, including Oregon, including USC and UCLA. He's got a number of SEC programs on that list. His father, George, played at Florida. That's where his brother Cruz was a walk-on last season. Cruz has since transferred back to in-state Arizona in his own backyard there in Tucson. So maybe the Arizona Wildcats are one to watch as they aim to keep that 5-star talent home. But this is in the early stages for him. And I can't count out Oregon. I cannot count out Washington. Both of those schools have prioritized the state of Arizona a number of times. Any other year, Emily, we're talking about the number 1 player in the state. Dylan Raiola exists in this cycle, but Elijah Rushing is no one to sleep on. And I think he's going to be drawing his share of visitors this spring as coaches make their way not only to Phoenix, but also down south to Tucson, Arizona.
5-star name as well. Blair, Super Bowl, who you got?
I got to go with the Chiefs.
Okay.
And it's more of a fan answer because I covered the recruitments very closely of 2 players. Juju Smith-Schuster here from LA area, Long Beach Poly, California, and covered him throughout his stay at USC as well. He's got a chance now to win a Super Bowl, and I know he's super excited about it. Got a chance to catch up with him a couple years ago down at the Polynesian Bowl when he was the Polynesian Pro Football Player of the Year. And then Trent McDuffie on the defensive side of the ball, 1st-round draft pick last year. He grew up maybe 15 minutes away from where I'm recording right now. He played at St. John Bosco as a senior, just down the road, 20 minutes away. So those are 2 players that I'm like, okay, I saw them, as sophomores, as freshmen in high school. It'd be really cool to see them lift that trophy on Sunday. There's some guys on the Eagles as well that, obviously you would root for, but those 2 are maybe a little closer to my heart, having followed their recruitment. So I'm riding with the Chiefs,
okay.
But I'm just hoping for a really fun game. How about you?
I got the Eagles. I'm feeling pretty good about it. I know it's weird to count out Patrick Mahomes, but I need to thank all of our viewers here for getting us to 71 likes. That's big, but unfortunately our producer Kenny was hoping to get to 100, so just to be nice to him, I'm going to give a shout out to Zach McPherson, somebody that Kenny used to coach back at Riverdale Baptist High School in Maryland. So shout out to him playing in the Super Bowl for the Eagles this weekend. Enjoy the game. Enjoy your weekend. We'll see you next week. For Blair Angulo, I'm Emily Proud, and this is the College Football Recruiting Show.